All right, so today we're digging into the 2025 financial report from Miyoshi Limited. Now, these guys make precision parts, for things like cars and computers. And what's so fascinating here is that their report presents this real puzzle. It's something that on the surface seems to defy basic business logic. Let's get right into it. So here it is, the core head scratcher that just leaps right off the page. The company's sales went down, and not by a little. So you think, okay, that means a bigger financial loss, right? But nope, that's not what happened. Their net loss actually shrank. So how on earth did they pull that off? That's the mystery we're going to solve together. And here's that paradox in black and white. Just look at this. On the left, you've got revenue. That's the money coming in from sales. And it dropped by nearly 17%. That is a major hit for any company. But then you look to the right, and the net loss actually got better by about 2%. I mean, sure, it's still a loss, but it's a smaller one. This tells you right away there has to be something else going on behind the scenes. Okay, so to really figure this out, we've got to break the story into two parts. First, let's talk about that headwind. We're going to look at the tough news and get to the bottom of where exactly that 17% drop in revenue came from. So, why the big drop in sales? Well, the report boils it down to two main things. Overall demand for their products just got weaker, and maybe more importantly, they lost some key customers who decided to go with other suppliers. And this wasn't some small issue. It was a real challenge across the whole business. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because when you break it down, you see the weakness was pretty much everywhere. Both the Automotive and Consumer Electronics divisions, their two biggest moneymakers, saw sales fall by around 15%. But look at data storage. I mean, wow. Yeah, it's a smaller part of their business, but its revenue just collapsed by nearly 60%. The report tells us this happened because customers in China just stopped ordering and switched suppliers. That is a massive blow to that one specific segment. And if we slice the data by country, we see a very similar story playing out. The Philippines, their biggest market, saw a pretty noticeable drop. But the real story here is China. Sales there just plummeted from over $15 million to just under $11 million. That's a huge piece of the overall decline, and it links right back to that weaker demand and those lost customers we were just talking about. But hey, it wasn't all bad news. It's worth pointing out they actually grew their revenue a little bit in Thailand, which shows some resilience. Okay, so that's the problem, a big, nasty drop in sales. Now for part two of our story, the solution. How in the world did Miyoshi shrink its losses with that kind of revenue headwind? Well, they fought back, and they fought back hard with some really aggressive and strategic cost control. Let's see exactly how they did it. The company basically attacked its expenses from all sides. First off, and this makes total sense, their raw material costs went down by over 20%. I mean, if you're making and selling less stuff, you're buying fewer materials, right? They also trimmed employee costs, especially by cutting headcount at a subsidiary that was winding down. They cut back on other operational stuff too, like professional fees and supplies. But all of that was just part of the story. There was one big, standout item that made a massive difference. This number right here, this is the hero of the income statement, $1.61 million. Now, this wasn't money from their regular day-to-day business. No, this was a one-time gain from selling off assets, specifically a factory and some land in Malaysia. This single event was absolutely vital. You have to understand, without this cash injection, the company's loss would have been much, much worse. It was a really clever financial move that just completely changed the look of the bottom line. So we've pretty much solved the puzzle of the shrinking loss, right? It was a mix of disciplined cost-cutting and a very, very helpful one-time asset sale. But here's the thing. A profit and loss statement only tells you about 1 year. To really understand if a company is healthy, you got to look at its cash. Is there enough cash coming in to pay the bills and invest in the future? Let's go check the engine room. The cash flow statement can look really intimidating, I know, but we can basically boil it down to three main stories for the year. First, the company's day-to-day business operations. They actually used up about $900,000 in cash. But, and this is the big one, their investing activities generated $3.5 million. And yep, you guessed it, this is mostly the cash they got from selling that factory. And finally, they used about $1.2 million for financing things, like paying back bank loans. So you put it all together, and this is the bottom line. Miyoshi ended the year with over $2 million more cash in the bank than when it started. So think about that. Despite a really tough year for sales, that big cash injection from selling the property actually made their financial position stronger. that is a great sign of stability. Okay, so we've looked at the past, we've looked at the present state of the company's finances, so now let's turn to the future. What does Miyoshi itself think is coming? What are the challenges and the opportunities that they see on the horizon? This quote, and we pulled this directly from their report, it really says it all. The leadership is not popping champagne corks here. Despite their success in managing costs and boosting their cash, their official outlook is cautious. And that tells us they believe the tough business environment that caused their sales to drop in the first place, well, it isn't going away anytime soon. And they're not being vague about it either. The report gives really specific reasons for this caution. They're watching some major global headwinds that are pretty much out of their control. You've got an uncertain worldwide economy, trade tariffs from the US, geopolitical conflicts creating instability all over, and just the general trend of rising costs to do business. All of these things create a really challenging and unpredictable world for a manufacturing company like Miyoshi. So what's the game plan for navigating these choppy waters? It's pretty simple, actually. Do more of what worked. The company plans to just focus on its core business and keep that strict cost discipline going. Essentially, they're battening down the hatches, trying to ride out this economic storm. And that really brings us to the final critical question here. We saw that in 2025, Miyoshi's brilliant cost management, plus that timely asset sale, was enough to overcome a serious drop in sales. But here's the thing. Those one-time gains, they don't happen every year. So the big question for the future is this. In a world full of economic uncertainty, can their strategy of just being super strict with costs continue to be enough to outweigh the fundamental challenge of finding growth and actually boosting their sales? That's the real story to watch for Miyoshi going forward. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.